Good morning, children. Welcome back to the lesson The Address, written by Maga Minko. Okay, the Dutch journalist and writer. Dear children, we had already a session on this, and we discussed about the introduction of the story, about the author, the main theme of the story, and all the characters that are females. And the story starts with the dialogue between Mrs. S. daughter and Mrs. Darling, and Mrs. Darling behaved as if she did not know about Mrs. S. daughter, but Mrs. S. daughter, I mean the narrator, could see the dress worn by that Mrs. Darling was once of her mother's. Okay, and but she was not ready to continue with the talk, and at the same time Mrs. S. daughter could see that address is well written on the jamb of that door, the side post of a door. Okay, and she could visualize all those things which were carried from her home during her mother's time, but after the war she lost her mother, but she wanted to touch them, she wanted to feel them, and she wanted to even enjoy the beauty of those possessions now. But since that lady did not entertain Mrs. S. daughter, she was about to come back. I mean, she has to catch her evening train. Okay, and after some days, she again thought of visiting Mrs. Darling's house once again. I think there we stopped, and she was received by her daughter. Mrs. Darling's daughter received Mrs. S. daughter. Okay, children. Now we are at page number 13. Yeah. I followed the girl along the passage. An old-fashioned iron Hanukkah candle holder hung next to a mirror. We never used it because it was much more cumbersome than a single candlestick. So the girl, out of her hospitality, wanted to take Mrs. S. daughter to her house, and when they were going towards their living hall, there was a passage, and she could see that Hanukkah is a feast of light. You can write down, dear children, you can write down the meaning. Hanukkah is the feast of lights, a Hebrew festival in December, and the candle holder hung next to a mirror. We never used it because that was once the procession of Mrs. S. mother. So that's why she had got that familiarity with the thing there. Now the first thing she noticed is that Hanukkah, and we never used it. It was very cumbersome. What is cumbersome? Large and difficult to move. Write down, dear children, write down the word meaning. Cumbersome. It is pronounced cumbersome. What is cumbersome? Large and difficult to move. It's a very heavy than a single candlestick. Won't you sit down? Asked the girl. She held open the door of the living room, and I went inside past her. I stopped horrified. I was in a room I knew and did not know. So, dear children, this dialogue is so very, very important. What do you mean by this? I was in a room I knew and did not know. That means all those things that are decorated in the living room once belonged to her. That way he knew the room, but she did not know, means it was a new surrounding. It's a new house, separate house, not hers. I found myself in the midst of things I did want to see again, but which oppressed me in the strange atmosphere. Actually, these are the things she wanted to see, but she was much oppressed because things were arranged in a strange atmosphere, or because of the tasteless way everything was arranged. Maybe the reason is things were not arranged properly, it were arranged in a strange way because of the ugly furniture or the muggy smell that hung there. Actually, one kind of muggy smell. What is muggy smell? Unpleasant. Write down and learn. Muggy means unpleasant. Smell that hung there. I don't know, but I scarcely, rarely dared look around me. The girl moved a chair. I sat down and stared at the woolen tablecloth. So when she was given a chair to sit, she could see the tablecloth that was woolen. I rubbed it. She felt it. My fingers grew warm from rubbing because it was cold outside and she wanted to just apply her fingers on it to get herself warm. I followed the lines of that, actually not really the purpose of getting herself warm. She was examining that tablecloth. If it was hers, there would be a burn mark. That was she searching for. I followed the lines of the pattern. Somewhere on the edge there should be a burn mark that had never been repaired. Now she remembers that tablecloth that once belonged to her, and if it was hers, there would be a burn mark at the edge. My mother will be back soon, said the girl. I have already made tea for her. Will you have a cup? She asked. Okay, actually she is expecting her mother shortly there, and she had already prepared tea for her, and out of the tea that she prepared, she offered a cup of tea to Mrs. S. daughter. Thank you. I looked up. The girl put cups ready on the tea table. She had a broad back. Dear children, you note it down. This girl had a broad back. What does it mean? Her mother also had that broad back. So she inherited the physical appearance of her mother. Just like her mother, she poured tea from a white pot. All it had was a golden border on the lid. So for the teapot also, Mrs. S. daughter identifies that if it was hers, there would be a golden border on the lid. I remembered. She opened a box and took some spoons out. So in a way we can say almost all items which were being used by them once belonged to Mrs. S. Okay, that's a nice box. I heard my own voice. It was a strange voice, as though each sound was different in this room. So something that echoed in her mind, that was a nice box. Oh, you know about them? Surprisingly, the girl that Mrs. Darling's daughter asked, you know them? She had turned around and brought me my tea. She laughed. My mother says it is antique, means old collection. Antique. We have got a lot more. She pointed around the room. See for yourself. And the girl started showing all these things, saying that it was antique. I had no need to follow her hand. Actually, who knew everything in advance? Mrs. S. daughter. Okay, but the other girl was introducing all the things. That's a fashion. Whenever you go to somebody's home, they will try to advertise what they have. Okay, I knew which thing she meant. I just looked at the still life over the tea table. As a child, I had always fancied the apple on the pita plate. There is a plate in her childhood. She used to fancy that apple on the pita plate that she liked. Okay, pita plate. It's one of the cookeries. We use it for everything, she said. Once we even ate off the plates hanging there on the wall. I wanted it so much, but it wasn't anything special. So one party knows about it already, the other party is introducing it, that's all. I had found the burn mark on the tablecloth. The girl looked questioningly at me. By the time she happened to find that burn mark on the tablecloth, but the other girl looked at her questioningly, as if enquiring something. Yes, I said, you get so used to touching all these lovely things in the house, you hardly look at them anymore. You only notice when something is missing because it has to be repaired or because you have lent it, for example. So when we have things, we want value, but when things are missing from our hand, we value it more. Okay. Again I heard, because that was not repaired during her mother's time. Again I heard the unnatural sound of my voice and I went down. I remember my mother once asked me if I would help her polish the silver spoons. And now she remembers her mother and also remembering her order to polish the silver spoon. It was a very long time ago, and I was probably bored that day, or perhaps I had to stay at home because I was ill, as she had never asked me before. I because all the time her mother only would do the polishing, cleaning, everything, but because of the illness, she asked this work to her. I asked her which silver she meant, and she replied, surprised, that it was the spoons, forks, knives, of course, and that was the strange thing. I didn't know the cutlery we ate of every day was silver. That girl now remembers during her mother time, they used to make use of that silver cutleries. Cutlery means knives, forks, and spoon is called cutlery. So all those things are made out of silver, and she very much remember those things. And the same items are being used by Mrs. Darling and her daughter at her residence now. The girl laughed again. I bet you don't know it is either. I looked intently with an intention, with a purpose at her. What we ate with, she asked, because she was talking to herself. Then the other girl is asking, what we ate with? Well, do you know? She hesitated. She walked to the sideboard and wanted to open a drawer. I will look, it is in here. So Mrs. Darling's daughter wanted to open one of the side drawer of a sideboard to show more things. I jumped up. I was forgetting the time. I must catch my train. Suddenly, Mrs. S. daughter thought of her timing and the train. So she must catch her train. So she had her hand on the drawer. Don't you want to wait for my mother? And by the time Mrs. Darling's daughter said whether she wanted to wait for her mother. No, I must go. I walked to the door. The girl pulled the drawer open. I can find my own way. There is no need to look at those things in the drawer, because all those things were once possessed by, Mrs. S or Mrs. S daughter means mother. Her mother. As I walked down the passage, I heard the jingling of spoons and forks. By the time who might have opened the drawer? That girl, Darling, and she could hear the jingling sound, the metal sound, the jingling sound of spoons and forks. So, dear children, what we have to understand is during the second visit, her wish was fulfilled. What was her wish? To see them, to touch them. So that part was done. But now let us see why she is not ready to take those things back. It is not that she has to catch the evening train and to leave. She could have gone the very next day also. But the thing is that she did not want to collect those things. That is what is explained in the last paragraph. Let us go with that. At the corner of the road, I looked up at the nameplate, Marconi Street, it said. Once again, she looked at the address. What is that address? Marconi Street, number 46. The address was correct, but now I didn't want to remember it anymore. This is the pledge she has taken. What is the pledge she has taken? She did not want to remember that again. I wouldn't go back there because the objects that are linked in your memory with the familiar life of former times instantly lose their value when severed from them. Cut means separated from them. Now, the memories of her mother, the memories of the war would come back. Okay, that is one reason. And you see them again in strange surrounding, and things are arranged or ill arranged in a strange surrounding. And what should I have done with them in a small rendered room where the shreds of black out paper still hung along the windows, and no more than a handful of cutlery fitted in the narrow table drawer. Now, the second reason that she did not want to collect them is now she is living in a rented room, a small room after the war. She was so financially very weak now. After her mother's death, she was living in a small rented room, and the poverty is very much seen with the shreds of black out paper still hung along the windows, and no more than a handful cutlery, and that space is very less, or we can say almost no. The cutlery fitted in the narrow table drawer. I resolved to forget the address. So finally she decided to forget the address of all the things I had to forget, that would be the easiest. So finally she decides to leave. She resolved, means took a strong decision, or determined to forget the address of all the things that she had to forget, that would be the easiest. Forgetting the things is the easiest according to her. So she left without waiting for Mrs. Darlings to take permission to take those things back. So dear children, so these are the points that you have to remember. So before we conclude, let us make a quick review of what we have discussed for the day. So today we discussed about that visit of the narrator to Mrs. Darling's house, and Mrs. Darling was not at her home. Instead, her daughter received her, and on the way to the dining hall she could see one of the old Hanukkah, that is a feast of light, and the candle holder which once belonged to them. It was very cumbersome, very what you call heavy than a single candlestick. And afterwards she was taken to the dining room, but she immediately made a statement. What was it? I was in a room I knew and did not know. That means all the things in the living room once belonged to her mother, and that's why she said he knew the room and he did not know, because that room did not belong to her. And gradually she could see the tablecloth, and she imagines that if and she concludes that if it was hers, there would be a burn mark. Okay, and later on during the conversation she realized, she found the burn mark on the tablecloth, and the other girl looked at her questioningly. Okay, and now she was touching and feeling all those things, and Mrs. Darling's daughter explained about the cutlery that they used to eat, that was silver, and those same cutleries were once used by Mrs. S and her daughter. And by the by, it was time for her to catch her evening train, and finally she decided not to take those things, because there are two reasons. One reason is that things were not arranged in a proper way, and the memories of the war and the previous life would come back, and her mother's thought also would come back. And the second reason is that she did not have enough space in her present rented room. So she finally took a strong decision. She resolved to forget the address, right? Of all the things that she had to forget, that would be the easiest. So children, now get ready for the question and their answer. Like, who was Mrs. Darling? Why did the narrator go to Mrs. Darling's house, number 46 Marconi Street? Why didn't Mrs. Darling allow the narrator to enter her house? What was the narrator's experience at Mrs. Darling's house when she visited it a second time? Could the narrator find some of the valuable belongings of her mother at Darling's house? Name the items. The narrator resolved to forget the address. Why? These are 5 important questions that can be asked from this lesson, right? So with this we wind up, and we will learn a new lesson tomorrow. Till then, have a nice day ahead. Thank you children. Bye.